Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. Today, we are joined by writer director Adam Sigal, whose newest movie, Chariot, is dropping in theaters and video on demand April 15th. Adam, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat.
I'm excited to talk to you too. Chariot is a very unique film. It's a story about reincarnation, but told from a very unique perspective. When you sat down to write this screenplay, what were some of the motivating driving forces for the perspective that you gave us?
Well, I knew I wanted to make a sci-fi film about reincarnation, and I think that my favorite kind of subgenre of film is high concept sci-fi on a small scale.
Okay.
Like more primer than Star Wars. Which I mean, not that I love
Yeah.
Star Wars too, but I just am really fascinated by those type of films that strive to tell a big story, but on a small scale. And then really my motivation was just to make people think about death and kind of just consider like, you know, that maybe we don't know what happens. It's kind of like the last frontier. Science has solved pretty much every big problem in the universe except
Yep.
where you're going to go when you die. And so I I didn't want to present any kind of like solutions or answers, but I wanted to create just kind of the idea that maybe there's something that we just haven't discovered yet, and that it's just as mundane as like gravity or something.
Absolutely. Now, the film, in my opinion, it's very abstract. It leaves a lot of, I guess, conclusions up to the viewer to be made. Was that your intent to let the viewers decide for themselves?
Unquestionably, my biggest influence as a storyteller is David Lynch, and the thing I respect the most about Lynch is that Lynch comes up with a concept that he wants to communicate, and he doesn't care what he actually shows. He doesn't care about linearity or narrative or really anything except what imbues that feeling.
Hmm.
Like Twin Peaks is the perfect example. Like, the show goes all over the place, but you come away from it feeling exactly what you wanted him to feel. So
Exactly.
I was less concerned with this story about a point A to point Z narrative than I was essentially just a story that kind of almost osmoses what I was trying to communicate.
That makes perfect sense. Now, the main character is Harrison, played by Thomas Mann, who did a brilliant job.
It was
But
amazing.
we got to talk about John Malkovich for a second. John Malkovich is a legend. I mean, no
Yes, it
question
is.
about it. Were you at all nervous when he took on this project that you are going to be directing the John Malkovich?
So it's interesting because in general, when I work with someone who's been in 50 or 100 movies, I just have no idea what I'm going to get, and so inherently I'm nervous. But the first Zoom I had with John, 2 months or so before we were going to shoot, he just right out of the gate was like, "This script is incredible. I haven't read a script this good in many years. I'm not going to change a word of dialogue. I'm doing this movie. Book my travel." And I was
Wow.
like, "Okay, well, we should talk to your agents." He's like, "Book my travel. I'll see you in Arkansas." And I was like, "Okay." And then throughout the process, he was so cool and so not what I expected. Just so like would text me and just be like, or he'd call me at god awful hours of the night. Adam, I think this character needs a wig. And I was like, okay. And he's like, it should be a bad wig because he's a phony. And I was like, done. We can get you a bad wig. And so he just was so cool. And like a perfect example, this is such a small thing. Like one day while we were in Arkansas, about 3 days before shooting, he said, Adam, I think Harrison doesn't sleep much. So do you think he would have his own coffee mug? And I was like, yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's fantastic.
Huh.
And he texts me like 2 hours later a bunch of coffee mugs he found in like a little gift shop near his house. And he's like, do you like any of these? But like, that's like from a legend like that. I mean, he really did make it about as comfortable as I could be. And he was a dream on set.
Wow. So he really gets into these roles, and throughout his career, he is known for playing some pretty eclectic, eccentric characters. So let's talk about his character in Chariot. He plays
Yeah.
Dr. Karn.
Yep.
From what we gather, he's sort of like a sleep therapist slash doctor.
Yeah.
Um, in your opinion, without giving any spoilers away, who does Dr. Karn represent?
So if the conceit of Chariot is, and this doesn't spoil anything, this is the premise of the film, is that reincarnation is overseen by a corporation.
Yeah.
And it's very bureaucratic, and there's nothing scary about it. It just is what it is. So John is just kind of one of the workers. He's just one of the guys who goes out, and if something's off, the system is not quite working. He
Oh, we lost you there for a second. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, he goes out and investigates it, and that's it. I mean, he's just a kind of, and so he has to learn about Harrison, but I mean, that's really his character. I wanted him to play it as kind of just like almost bored with it. Like, it's such a fascinating concept to us, with reincarnation, but I envisioned that to him, it's just another day's work. He
Just
gets
another
up.
client.
Yeah, he has to go find out what's going on. So that's how I wanted him to play it. So a lot of his performance is like almost him like straining to be normal, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Which
Yeah.
for John, must be an actual strain because he's so strange in the best possible way. But yeah, and he totally got that. But that's really his character within the framework of the story.
Now, let's talk about his costume for a second. You said he was the one that brought up the whole wig idea. Did he also come up with I gotta ask this, with the ribbon in the wig?
Yes, he showed up to set one day with that in his hair, and my makeup and hair girl, Dusty, kind of said, "John has a ribbon in his hair," and I was like, "Perfect,
Let's
leave it
go
in
with
there.
it.
Let's do it." Yeah, that's just John, man. He just and my kind of general philosophy as a filmmaker is I'm the director, and so I'm kind of the guide or the conductor of the orchestra, but I don't know how to play any of these instruments. These
Yeah.
are artists who are all better at what they do than me, especially a guy like John Malkovich, who's done countless movies. He'll forget more about acting than I'll ever know. So when he has an idea for his character, I take that very seriously. And like, I've already pitched him my vision for it and everything. So how he chooses to embody that character, I defer to him in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. I,
And the same with all the departments. If my production designer says that, I know you're trying to accomplish a very somber scene here. What if I paint the wall this color instead of this color?
yeah.
These are artists that are masters of their craft.
I've had many directors tell me 70 to 80% of directing is casting, putting the right people in place, and getting out of their way.
Absolutely.
Abs-
That is very much the case. And trying to fit in with all these talented artists around you and hoping they don't notice. Yes.
Absolutely. So Harrison, Thomas Mann's character, moves into this apartment complex, which is bizarre, and that's an understatement. But yet his reactions as he explores this complex and the people living in it and their really eclectic personalities seem to be, yeah, surprise and shock, but not on the level as you would expect. Did you have to have a lot of one on one time with Thomas to make him understand what you were going for and the vision that you wanted him to portray?
Well, first of all, Thomas is incredible.
Yeah.
He's such an amazing actor. After the highest praise for him is like, after this movie, I become very good friends with Malkovich, and he messages me about Thomas probably once a month and just says how great Thomas was and how hopes he's doing well and everything. But
Yeah.
so Thomas and I kind of discussed it, and from what I recall, we kind of agreed, like, look, like the first strange things that happen, he's like, what is happening? This is really strange. But then it's kind of like, after a while, he's just like, oh yeah, look, there's conjoined twins that are, okay, well, that I guess it's just this place. And so I loved his performance, was so perfect, just as kind of the lens of the audience, like the Han Solo of the film, who's just surrounded by strange, bizarre events and people, but just kind of looks at it and goes, okay, this is what's happening.
That's absolutely true. We are taken through this journey through Harrison's eyes, and as he explores it, we as the audience get to find out about it as well. So let's move on to Scout Taylor Compton. Okay, she really showed off her acting chops in this
Yeah.
film. I mean, I have
Yeah.
seen Scout do a lot of movies, mostly horror, but man, she put on her acting chops on display. Were you surprised when you casted her and you saw how brilliant she was as to how brilliant she actually was?
Well, I mean, only surprised from the perspective that this is such a difficult role. And so
Yeah.
when you're pitching a role to an actress and you're saying, "Okay, stick with me. Your body is inhabited by the ghost of a pervy old British man." And he comes out sometimes and it's kind of like, "Oh, okay."
Oh, it's okay.
Sorry, my phone was
Yeah,
being.
yeah,
She
no
honestly
problem.
loved it, and Scout's honestly one of my favorite people. I mean, she's so amazing on set, and she really prepared for the role. She showed off her British accent. I think the first time we spoke, and I was like, "Yes, that's it. That's perfect." And then the biggest thing with Scout, and why I think that her horror background translated well to this role, which is not a horror film or horror role, is just she's used to just going for it, like just diving in and having no shame or no kind of like hold back. She's just like, no, like this is I'm possessed by an old British man. Here we go. And just goes for it to the utmost of her ability. And that's really was what I wanted. So I didn't, like I had no way of knowing how brilliant her performance would be when she was demonstrating it for me and talking, but I knew she was going to go for it. And that was
Yeah.
all I wanted. And then it turned out phenomenal and it couldn't have been better. And it's like my favorite scenes of the movie. And I just crack up in the scene with her and Thomas. It
You
kills
talking
me
about the
every
scene
time.
with the gun?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, no, the scene at the party when she's just
Oh, yeah.
berating him, that British man. It's like, what am I watching right now?
I think
So
this is my opinion. Scout has done so many horror movies. Of course, she was brilliant in the Halloween 2007 remake as Laurie Strode, and she sort
absolutely.
of got boxed into this horror genre. I think what you did for her in casting her and allowing her to show her acting abilities is going to land her a lot of more roles outside of the horror genre, and she
I
deserves
mean,
that.
I'll tell you this. I mean, I'm actually. I'm sure you may have asked about this later. I'm leaving on Monday actually to go shoot my next movie in England. We have a big star attached as the lead, which I think we'll probably announce next week.
Okay.
And it's a period piece, in the 1930s, and it's based on real people. But the reason I bring this up is Scout will be in all of my movies, like moving forward. Like, I mean, she's so good. And so I hope this leads to more diverse opportunities for her
Yeah.
because she's not, and that's not even taking away from what she is. Like, the Scream Queens are awesome. Like,
Yeah.
I have so much respect. It's such a difficult subgenre to play and to put yourself out there to that extent. But yeah, I mean, she has the diversity to do anything.
Exactly. And that was really put on display in Chariot. Now, her dual personalities in the film, Lauren and the grumpy British dude, Oliver,
Yeah.
is Lauren her real personality or is it just
Yeah.
another persona that's
No,
inhabited
she's
her?
no, she's not, and I mentioned that in the script. She's not schizophrenic.
Okay.
She's possessed,
Yeah.
but only part time. They have a timeshare, so they have an agreement as to when he takes over. But he hates the arrangement, and he's very pervy, and so she talks about it, and she's like, it's really uncomfortable because sometimes he watches me while I'm having sex, and it's such a bizarre like concept to even wrap your head around when you start to like think about it. But no, she's not schizophrenic in the film. She's possessed by the ghost of an old man.
Okay. And Lauren
And
is Lauren. That's her.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, now let's move on to Shane West. Okay, he
Yeah,
plays Rory Calhoun. Now his
yeah,
character is the most mysterious of all the
yeah.
characters.
Correct.
After I got done watching the film, I found myself questioning what his place was in this whole, I guess, chain of command of people. What was your idea for Rory in the story?
So what I wanted to accomplish, his character is kind of a tool to sort of further enhance and explain the corporation, as it will. Like that's the purpose of that aspect of the story, is like trying to so to and let me preface this by saying, this is an independent film with
Yeah.
very lofty ambitions. So some of it may have worked, some may not have. But two of the things I wanted to try to establish with regard to, Malkovich Incorporated, quote unquote, is in the opening, just sort of the timelessness of it and the concept that they've been around forever, right? Then I wanted to establish the power of, and sort of where they sit in the strata of society, and the concept that like this is a successful, pretty high level guy, but he still answers to this corporation. And if they need something, he's just Johnny on the spot for them. So that's really the purpose. And I kind of wanted to tie that into the story to just like give a little tiny prick of insight into the influence that these guys have.
Yeah. And the corporation, it's great because depending on the viewer, corporation can be God. For other people, it can be the cosmos, the universe that's in control.
Yeah,
It could be anything to anybody. Now,
absolutely.
as we talked about, the whole concept of reincarnation, for you personally, is reincarnation something that you're interested in? How much research did you do for the screenplay as far as getting different people's opinion about reincarnation?
So I, at this point in my life, consider myself for the most part to be a very spiritual atheist, if you wanted to say.
Okay.
And I don't, how can I say this in a way that will both not be offensive, but will explain it. The one thing I'm absolutely certain of is that there's more than this.
Yeah.
Like that, but I'm not entirely certain that we have necessarily 100% solved
Yeah.
what it is. The concept of heaven, for instance, sounds fantastic to me, and I would love nothing more than that. I have yet to be able to fully wrap my head around it, from that perspective,
Yeah.
as like, okay, yes, this is the real deal. This works. So if I right now am in this place of like not knowing what else there is and being okay with that, if I look at it from a scientific perspective and something like the principal law of thermodynamics about energy can't go anywhere, nothing can
That
actually
is
go
my
away.
thinking too. We are a
Yeah,
ball of energy. Energy does not get destroyed.
it
And
can't. Right.
what
So
happens
so
to it?
that's the only sort of theory when you get into sort of pseudo religious type theories that makes any sense to me at all.
Yeah.
And that's not me saying hey guys,
No.
reincarnation's real. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I hope so. I just lost someone very important to me, and I really hope we meet again. But it's the only concept that has ever made sense to me, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, and has ever, and that's not discounting any of the others, because I'm fully sitting here saying I have no idea.
Yeah.
And maybe if we end up in heaven, cool. I don't know if I'm going to be there, but hopefully I'll see you guys somewhere.
Yeah.
But that's the so with I did research about reincarnation, and I've researched that a lot in my life, but also too, like, I feel like a lot of the research that we do and a lot of the sort of aspects with religion are kind of to play into what I wanted to accomplish with Chariot, about like we're all just afraid of death.
Yes.
And it's actually a recent thing for me. It was within the last 5 years of my life. I'm 39, when I would wake up and like legitimately have this unbelievably strange moment of like, I can't believe someday I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
Like someday I'm not gonna wake up again. That's so unfathomable to me. And so I get the urge about like, I want to go figure out what's out there and what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And I reached a point where I was kind of like, like I do believe that there is something else, and I'm also okay right now not knowing what that is. And it's horrible. And not to bring a big downer on this interview, but so my executive producer on this film, who was also my partner, she was my life partner, she was my girlfriend. She passed away about 2 months ago,
I'm
and she
sorry.
was like integral. She was the Melissa McPhail. I mean, she was what got this film greenlit. I mean, she was everything, and she was on set with me the whole time, and she was in the editing room with me. And I mean, this was her movie in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, along with mine. And then, you know, very suddenly in December, she got sick, and by March 1st of this year, she passed on. And so, obviously, in a very strange way, this film has, as I go back and rewatch it, it's almost like
Uh,
the what I wanted to accomplish in this film was to make people think a bit more about death and the concept that maybe there is something else out there and we just haven't figured it out yet. I almost had to kind of take my own lesson with regard to that and,
yeah.
think that for myself. And, you
And
know,
I think you hit the nail on the head. We as human beings, it's okay to say we don't know, but to slam the door and say when you're dead, you're dead. There's nothing. That's it. You're gone. That's a little bit naive, you know.
I'm not a materialist, and I
Yeah,
think that thinking is horrifically dangerous because it's just like, okay, everybody's just a piece of meat walking
yeah,
around, and so it's okay if I go shoot them because it
yeah.
doesn't matter. And I
Exactly.
very very strongly do not feel that way, but I also have trouble with the idea of a very specific faith of a certain type being like, like for me, like I think about, and this is not me harping on Christianity at all, but like, I think about the countless wars
Oh
and battles
God.
and whatnot have been fought over what really is almost minutia of that religion. And it's just unfathomable to me that people could really truly believe that this minutia that they believe is the cosmic truth that has always existed throughout the entire universe and how long it's been around, and that guy's minutia that they believe is wrong.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
More people have died in war over the name of God and their God than any other thing, and it's just it's
That's what I'm saying.
horrible.
It's unbelievable.
It is
So
insane.
I'm
Now,
somewhere in the middle.
so the apartment complex, itself in Chariot is sort of like a character in itself. Uh,
Definitely.
in your story, in your mind, what made that complex so important? Is it just like a place on this earth where like the veil is very thin between us and other dimensions? What
You
does it
know,
represent to you?
what I wanted from the Lafayette, and this script went through a lot of iterations, and it's funny because so there's two aspects to Chariot. There's the strange environment in which it takes place, and then there's the story.
Yeah,
There's the very basic storyline of Thomas and Rosa. And so aside from just establishing kind of a cool atmosphere in which to set the film and to have it just be an interesting film to watch and not just like a CW-esque drama
yeah,
about like love over lifetimes, what I wanted to accomplish with that was almost that the building itself was a character that collects stories. So it's like it collects unusual people in a way where it draws them in. And so the Harrison and Maria story is a unique story, and they're unique characters for a very specific reason in the film. And so the building drew them in, like it did Scout's possessed creature or possessed character and
yeah.
other characters you meet, throughout the film.
Absolutely. One last
Mhm.
question before we go. This time just flew. When it came to Harrison's dream, it was very simplistic. It's him going to the kitchen, his mom cooking, and then the twist is it's sort of a memory that there was an attic in the house where he grew up in, but he says in the movie, there is no attic in my house. He busted the drywall in the ceiling, and there is no attic. What?
Right.
It's not a horrible dream. It's not a nightmare. It's more like a recurring memory. We know we
Yeah.
can incorporate that with the whole reincarnation thing, but it troubles him enough to go see a doctor about it. Again, what
Yeah.
is that dream? Is it the obvious where he's seeing images of a past life?
No. So basically, and it's funny. about the subject of dreams real quick. I cut one of my favorite lines in the movie that Malkovich says because the scene just was too long with it in there, where he talks about dreams, and I'm just fascinated by this by the concept of dreams because it's so odd to me how our brain plays this trick on us and
Hmm.
it creates this movie for us to watch but then also convinces us that it's real, like it's
Yeah.
just so strange. And so the purpose of the dream is I wanted to just have somewhere where it's hidden, and what's hidden is the memory of Rosa or
Yeah.
of Maria.
Maria.
And I didn't want to me it would have been too distracting if it was like this nightmare where he's being chased by alligators and then there's this golden, thing. And I wanted it to be mundane. I wanted it to be because the type of recurring dreams I often have are pretty mundane, and it's just like a memory from my childhood.
Exactly.
And the reason he goes to see Dr. Karn and why the whole story kind of comes about is because he has this dream almost every night. He's had it thousands and thousands of times, and that's why he's going crazy, because he knows there's something about it, and it's this attic that wasn't there in his childhood home that's there in the dream of his childhood
Hmm.
home. So he's just obsessed with trying to understand why, and it would be so frustrating because he can't change anything. He's just going through the dream, and he sees it.
Yeah.
So it's just this kind of like, to me, it was the sort of cinematic way to, if one had this, like, not even a memory but like the shadow of a memory from a past life, how it might manifest in your current, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes perfect sense.
Okay,
Adam,
cool.
the movie, guys, you got to watch this movie. It's coming out April 15th. Uh, uh, Limited theater release, I assume, and
Yeah.
video on demand. You can get it on your digital streaming platform of choice. I'm assuming Vudu, Amazon Prime Video.
Yeah, I'll have to check. I know it's coming out theatrically. I'll find out about the on demand and what streaming
Yeah,
platforms, and I'll share it. But yeah,
yeah, I'm sure it's going to be on
yeah,
the big players.
it
Check it
is.
out. It's called Chariot. It's coming out April 15th. Written and directed by Adam here. It's brilliant. It's a story about reincarnation told in a way that you've never seen before. Adam, I want to thank you so much for coming
Thank you so
on
much for having
here
me on.
and giving us your insights to this great film. Any final thoughts you
Absolutely.
want to share?
No, I hope people like it. A very big star actor read it or watched the movie recently, who I'm talking to about my new film, and his feedback was perfect. He said, I can't say I fully understood it, but the parts I did understand, I absolutely loved. And I was like,
Yeah.
perfect. That is what I want.
And you have a lot of movies that are in the works, like you mentioned. So we got to bring you back when those movies
Yes,
come out and talk about them. Thank you to Adam.
absolutely.
Thank
Thanks a
you to,
lot.
thank you to our viewers who are watching this live and those who are going to be watching this later on. On behalf of Adam, Sigal, and myself, stay safe. Stay walking,
Yep.
everybody. Bye bye.
Have a good one. Bye.